Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. A normal Tuesday. That's what it was until it wasn't. My name is Alan, and my world shattered the morning I discovered my wife, Sarah, had been unfaithful. The entire ordeal began on a day that seemed no different from any other. Early in the morning, while everyone was still asleep, I was in the kitchen with a cup of black coffee, getting ready for a hectic day at work. But at that moment, a feeling of unease kept me awake. I looked around the silent kitchen. Usually, at this hour, Sarah would be making breakfast, slamming cabinet doors, and muttering under her breath about her endless chores. But today, there was only silence. I went upstairs. The bedroom was dark. Sarah lay on the bed, still as a statue, her eyes wide open. Her expression was unsettling. She seemed to be gazing through the walls, lost in a thought she couldn't escape. "Are you all right?" I asked, a growing anxiety tightening my chest. She turned her head toward me. Her eyes, normally lively and warm, were now cold, as if they belonged to a stranger. "Yeah, just tired," she answered, her voice almost a whisper. It was not the voice I was used to hearing every morning. It lacked the usual happiness that filled our home. It was unfamiliar and foreign. I was silent, just standing there, observing her face as if I were seeing it for the first time. Something was definitely not adding up. This moment was a turning point for me. The vague, incomprehensible feeling I'd been living with for weeks suddenly became real and tangible. I went back downstairs and started to get ready for work on autopilot. But something strange caught my eye again. There was a bag on the table near the door. It wasn't just any bag. It was a new, designer one with a subtle scent I couldn't recognize. This was not the bag Sarah carried every day. My heart clenched. There was no way this was a mistake. "Sarah?" I called over my shoulder, attempting to sound calm. "Did you leave your bag by the door?" I heard her footsteps. She appeared in the doorway, and I thought her face tightened for a moment. "Oh, it's not mine," she muttered a little too quickly. "Someone I know must have left it. I just put it there." Her words sounded uncertain. She almost stumbled over them. That small, barely noticeable moment broke something inside me. I nodded, pretending to accept her explanation, but inside, I didn't believe a word. All the little changes in her routine, the strange phone call she'd ended as soon as she heard me, now formed a single, coherent, and terrifying pattern. A little later, I left my business behind and drove away from the house. I could no longer sit idly by. For the first time, I decided to do something I had always considered unacceptable. I got into my car and parked not far from the house. I turned off the engine, but my thoughts kept me awake, my heart beating loudly like a drum against my chest. When I finally saw Sarah get out, she was walking fast, as if she were trying to escape herself. Once she was in the car, she drove off abruptly. I started the engine and followed her, keeping a safe distance. The road seemed endless, but I knew that if I stopped, I would never know the truth. After a while, I saw Sarah park her car in front of a tall downtown building. Sitting in my car, I watched her get out and head toward the entrance. But she wasn't alone. A man stepped out from the shadows of the building and walked toward her. Their gazes met, and there was something heartbreaking about that moment. It wasn't a friendly glance or a coworker's greeting. There was something between them that was impossible to ignore. It was as if my heart had stopped. The feeling of falling into a bottomless abyss gripped me, but I couldn't back down. I had to know. I needed proof. I remained motionless until they entered the building together. As I continued to watch, I noticed them take the elevator and soon disappear behind the door of a luxurious apartment. This address, this standard of living, was not a place I expected Sarah to be. I froze. The deafening silence around me seemed to intensify the storm inside me. All the little details I'd been ignoring flashed before my eyes again. The new bag on the table, the changed rhythm of her life, the phone conversation she'd been so hurried to end. All these signs, which had seemed random before, now formed an undeniable picture. I just stood there as if chained. Anger came in waves, mixed with the sharp pain of disappointment. I realized that the life I was building was coming apart. But this mixture of emotions didn't break me. It gave me determination. I knew I couldn't go on living in this chaos. Walking back to the car, I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply. Seeing them together, hiding behind that door, was like being stabbed in the chest. I couldn't stand idly by. That moment was forever imprinted on my memory. When I got home, the house greeted me with an oppressive silence. Sarah wasn't there yet. I sat down at the kitchen table, turned on my laptop, and sprang into action. Now, I needed not just hunches but facts, cold and irrefutable. This had to be the point of no return. I decided to enlist the help of my old friend, Cole. He worked in security and investigations. His professionalism and ability to keep things under wraps inspired confidence. I dialed his number that evening, and it only took a few words for him to understand. "I'll help, but you have to be ready for anything," he said, his voice as hard as steel. "I'm ready," I answered, though doubts raged inside. At the same time, I began preparing to install hidden cameras in the house. Sarah wouldn't suspect a thing. Her office, the living room, the kitchen, every corner had to be monitored. I couldn't afford any mistakes. Every detail, every missed call, every apology for absence. It was all now part of an inextricable pattern that could no longer be ignored. The family photos on the walls reminded me that I had once considered this house a fortress. Now, however, it seemed like a place filled with lies. A family photo hung on the wall, capturing moments that once seemed happy. Now every glance at it hurt. It seemed those moments were just a mirage hiding a lie. I couldn't let it go unpunished. Cole began to provide me with details about the man Sarah was dating. His name was Eddie Harris. He turned out to be a business partner in the construction industry, a married man who had children. But what struck me most of all was how much his name cut my ears. I had never met the man, but I knew for sure I didn't want him to be a part of my life in any way. The evidence continued to pile up. Not only did the desire to understand the truth grow inside, but also the determination to catch them so they couldn't turn away. These two had ruined my world, and I was determined to make them pay. One evening, after waiting for Sarah to leave for work, I decided to delve deeper into the investigation. I couldn't just stand by anymore. I sent Cole a text asking him to help me keep an eye on them. It didn't take long for him to reply, and soon the plan was ready. The whole next day was unbearable for me. I couldn't concentrate on my work. My mind was racing with hundreds of thoughts. Pictures of betrayal kept popping up in my mind over and over again, like an endless movie that could not be stopped. As night fell, the phone rang. It was Cole. He was near Sarah's house and had captured something important. Moments later, the pictures arrived on my phone. They showed Sarah and Eddie walking out of a luxury hotel. They looked like they weren't even trying to hide. Sarah was smiling, and that smile, I'd never seen it like that when she was with me. It was a low blow, and I felt my heart tearing apart. It's impossible to describe in words the storm that raged inside me. I asked myself, had she ever loved me? We had been through so much together, and now I was facing this harsh reality. But I wasn't going to hesitate any longer. Despite the pain, I decided to take action. I would no longer allow myself to be weak, a victim. Sarah had to see the truth and realize that I was no longer a person to be deceived and manipulated. When Sarah got home, I had everything ready. The anger that was bubbling up inside was impossible to contain. "Sarah," I called out in a cold voice. "We need to talk." She froze, a look of surprise and concern on her face. "What's going on, Alan?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual gentleness but with an air of weariness. "I'm not going to play these games anymore," I said harshly. "What's going on between you and Eddie?" I spoke without hesitation, straight and clear. Sarah opened her mouth to say something, but she was silent, as if she realized that any excuses were meaningless now. "Alan, you don't understand," she started. But I interrupted. "I do understand, Sarah," I said, feeling the emptiness inside grow even larger. "I don't want your explanation. I need justice." I wasn't just thinking about myself at that moment. Everything we built for our children was now in ruins. Sarah fell silent, standing motionless. Her eyes no longer radiated the confidence that once seemed unshakable. I could see her hesitating, trying to find something to say, but I knew it didn't matter. She stood in front of me, silently struggling with her inner demons, trying to find words that would make a difference. But instead of words, there was a heavy, suffocating silence in the room. I stared at her, feeling like a predator ready to destroy everything that had been built on lies and betrayal. I didn't want to attack, but I knew there was no retreat. "Alan, you don't understand," she said finally, her voice shaking, but she was trying desperately to maintain a semblance of calm. "I understand everything, Sarah," I answered without the slightest hesitation. "Do you think I haven't noticed anything? It's all too obvious." Every word I said seemed to stab her in the heart. I saw the tension on her face grow, her eyes begin to fill with tears, but I didn't care. There wasn't a shred of compassion left in me, no room for forgiveness. The pain I felt was too deep, and the betrayal too strong to just let it go. "What are you going to do?" she asked in a weak voice that sounded faintly hopeful. "Yes, I'm going to destroy everything," I answered coldly. My words sounded harsh and deliberate. "You destroyed not only our family but everything I believed in. I devoted years of my life to building a home for us, to protecting you, and now you." She opened her mouth as if she was going to object, but I didn't give her the chance. "What can you say to make me believe you?" I interrupted sharply. "You've lied to me for too long. You have no more words but the truth." Sarah's face turned pale, her gaze blank. There was a flicker of regret in her eyes, but it wasn't the remorse I was expecting. It was only the belated fear of realizing what she'd done. "Alan, I'm sorry," she whispered finally. I met her gaze with a look of fear, but even that fear didn't move me. I felt no pity. "Sarah, I didn't get a chance to apologize when you left me, but I'm definitely not going to forgive you now." Her voice was almost inaudible when she asked, "What are you going to do about Eddie?" "I have a plan," I answered shortly and turned away. I left her standing there at the door, eyes full of helplessness. But there was nothing else holding me in this house. Everything that had once been beautiful and important had turned into cracks that couldn't be fixed. I realized I wasn't going to stop here. It had to end. I had to meet Eddie. I couldn't let him escape the consequences. I dialed Cole's number and let him know it was time. "I'm going to meet with him," I said firmly. "Get everything ready, Cole." A careful and calculating man, Cole immediately realized I wasn't kidding. He knew it had to go flawlessly. Despite the rage boiling inside me, I knew I had to keep my cool, or I risked ruining everything. Eddie had to pay, not only for hurting me but for destroying my family. When I arrived, Eddie was standing outside the apartment where he and Sarah were meeting. He was smoking lazily, looking completely calm as if nothing was wrong. He had no idea that this day would be the last day of his quiet life. I walked toward him, feeling each step bringing me closer to the end of this nightmare. "Eddie," I said quietly but coldly. He turned, and his face changed instantly. In his eyes, I saw reality crashing down on him as he realized that today was the end of it. He turned, and his eyes went wide for a moment as he realized who was in front of him. I stood straight, looking at him with a cold, merciless stare. "I know what you think of me," I began, not giving him time to come to his senses. "And I know that you're sure you won't have to answer for what you've done. But you're about to see that it's not going to be that easy." Eddie took a step back. His face changed, his fear so obvious that even the light of the street lamps couldn't hide it. "Alan, you can't do this," he said, his voice shaking like an autumn leaf in the wind. "You don't know anything about me. You just don't understand." "Don't you dare talk to me about understanding," I interrupted sharply, my rage sounding in every word. "You failed me. You destroyed my family, and now you're going to pay for it." He made no further attempt to object. In that moment, it felt like the whole world around us froze. He looked at me, and his gaze was filled with panic and terror, but I didn't care. There was no more pity or compassion left inside me. Cole appeared from the shadows behind me, holding a thick folder. It contained all the evidence, photos, videos, correspondence, that connected Sarah and Eddie. "All set, Alan," he said seriously, his voice sounding like a gunshot. "Great," I replied shortly. "Now we're going to make it public." Eddie turned pale. His face, which had hitherto concealed confidence, now reflected only shock. Everything he thought was protected and secret was exposed in an instant. The world he had worked so hard to build was crumbling before his eyes. "No one escapes the consequences of betrayal," I said, my every word like a sentence. Eddie just stood there, his face contorted with the realization that his safety, his lies, and everything he held dear no longer existed. He didn't dare say anything, but I could see his legs shaking, the way he struggled for balance, trying in vain to keep his composure. The confidence that had come from him had melted away, giving way to panic. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction as I watched Eddie face the reality he'd created, but along with that, there was an emptiness inside me. Everything I was doing was more than just revenge. It was payback for the pain that had been inflicted on me. Cole stood beside me, his gaze as cold as mine. The documents he gathered were indisputable evidence that solidified the trap we'd set. Eddie couldn't escape, and I was sure there would be consequences for his betrayal. "I warned you," I said quietly, my voice full of indifference. "You'll answer for what you did." Eddie tried to stay on his feet, but his body gave away his weakness. His voice shook when he finally spoke. "Alan, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry, but I don't want my life to be ruined." His eyes were pleading, but I didn't hesitate for a second. "You think I'm going to forgive you because of your apology?" I answered, my voice firm and uncompromising. "You think you can fix what's already ruined? You destroyed my family, ruined everything I loved, and now all I have to do is watch you suffer the consequences of your actions." I didn't add anything more, but I knew it wouldn't end there. Eddie would lose not only the money but everything he had ever thought was important. Everything he had ever created would crumble like a house of cards. After everything fell apart, I began to bring my plan to completion. It wasn't just about confronting Eddie. It was about making sure Sarah had her share of responsibility. I contacted an attorney, told him the situation, and asked him to protect my interests in the divorce. Sarah no longer looked as confident as she used to. Now there was only anxiety on her face. She was afraid of what I might do and dared not object when I demanded a fair division of property and rights. But in spite of all the steps I took, the pain would not let me go. Even as my plan progressed as I wanted it to, I couldn't stop thinking about the children, Tom and Ollie. They didn't deserve to witness all of this. The images of their innocent faces, devoid of guilt, kept me on my toes. I knew this divorce would change their lives forever, but I couldn't forgive Sarah. She had betrayed not only me but my trust. The family I had worked so hard to build had been torn apart. It made it impossible to give up on my revenge. I wanted Sarah to experience the pain I felt, even if it meant she would face unbearable suffering. Sarah began to seek comfort from her close friends, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to give her a chance to make things right. Her lies had lasted too long. I didn't need her anymore, and I wasn't going to let her continue to hurt our family. As for Eddie, he was beginning to feel the full weight of the consequences of his actions. I found a way to make him answer for what he had done, not only to me but to his own family. He couldn't avoid paying for what he had done. That night, I got a call from Cole. He informed me that Sarah and Eddie's accounts were frozen, and they couldn't withdraw the money or do anything to counter the evidence I gathered. Their lives had turned into something completely different, devoid of security, future plans, and freedom. Cole also messed with Eddie's business associates, resulting in the loss of his financial and social standing. In the end, Eddie was left alone, immersed in the darkness he had created himself. A strange sense of contentment filled me, but along with it, I felt an emptiness. Everything had changed, but could I continue to live with that pain? Would I be able to forgive myself and Sarah, even when things had gotten this far? I kept asking myself, would this revenge be the cure for my wounds? I knew I had avenged Sarah and Eddie's betrayal, but there was a wound deep in my heart that nothing could heal. In the days that followed, I tried to get back to life, but it was never the same. Meetings with friends and quiet evenings with my children no longer brought the same warmth. The pain I had endured was like a shadow following me, a constant reminder of myself. I realized that even the victory I had won did not bring me what I was really looking for. One day, sitting in the living room and looking out the window, I suddenly realized that revenge cannot bring happiness. It only gives temporary satisfaction, but then the pain returns. As a human being, I had to face my pain and loss to find a way forward. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time.